Hello everyone, my name is Jacob Lane and I am presenting on the information security of payment technologies. I will begin by discussing how payment methods have evolved over time. I will then explain how each of the newer payment technologies works and functions. This will help you get a better understanding of each technology so that I can go into further detail about the security risks of each payment method. In this presentation, I will also discuss the effect COVID-19 has had on payment methods and the future outlook of more secure payment methods. This section will discuss the history and the evolution of payment technologies. It is important to understand the timeline of payment technologies before going into more detail about the information security of those technologies. The earliest known use of coins and paper to be used as a payment medium dates back to around 600 to 700 BC. Even though paper payment methods were created around 700 BC, paper payment methods were not fully adopted until around the mid-1600s. Around the same time, banks began to issue paper banknotes in exchange for the face value of precious metal coins. As it became unreasonable to carry large amounts of money at a time, paper checks were created in the mid-1800s to make larger transactions more convenient. The next large payment innovation was created by Western Union in 1871. Western Union created the first electronic money transfer system through the telegraph network, which was called the wire transfer. It took thousands of years to innovate from using coins as a payment method to using the first electronic money transfer. The largest innovation was yet to come, which was the creation of the first card. In 1914, Western Union continued to innovate by introducing charge cards. Charge cards would be linked to individuals' charge accounts, and the user would be able to purchase items using credit. A variety of businesses at the time accepted charge cards. The true innovation was made in 1950 when Frank McNamara created the first widely accepted cardboard charge card called the Diners Club card. This led to many well-known companies making their own cards, such as American Express and Bank of America. Bank of America made the biggest breakthrough when they created the first modern-day credit card in 1958. The first implementations of credit cards would have to use a manual imprinter to capture the transactions. The imprinter allowed a merchant to capture the information on a customer's credit card and provided 3 copies using carbon paper, one for the customer, one for the bank, and one for the merchant. This system was not secure or efficient because card authorization and approval did not take place. MasterCard and Visa would send out a list to all merchants that contained the credit card numbers that were canceled, stolen, or past due. It was a very lengthy process to cross-reference credit card numbers, so most merchants would just skip checking altogether. Since more customers were getting credit cards and the booklet system was so inefficient, card companies switched to telephone authorization. This was used to determine the customer's credit and to facilitate the transaction. This was also a timely and inefficient process, but it was not replaced until the creation of the magnetic stripe technology. The magnetic stripe technology was created by an IBM engineer in 1969. The magnetic stripe works by holding the customer's personal and financial information that could then be decoded by a machine. The issue with this innovation is that every retailer would then need to have a point of sale system, POS system, to decode the new magnetic stripe cards. At this time, retailers were still using the slow and inefficient manual imprinting machines. It took another 10 years for Visa to create the first POS system that would be widely used. The POS system allowed a business to electronically capture and send credit card information, greatly speeding up transaction approval process. The next iteration of a credit card payment technology was the EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa (EMV) chip card created in 1994. The EMV chip increased the security of customer information compared to the magnetic stripe. European countries adopted the EMV chips much faster than the United States. All POS systems had to be updated in order to take the newer EMV chip cards. The next iteration of payment technology was contactless payment options. More recently, there's been a rise in contactless payment technology. In 2004, the first contactless cards were used in the United States. Contactless cards worked by using near-field communication (NFC) technology. This allows data to flow between two devices that are in very close proximity to one another. Virtual payment methods such as Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, and Google Pay have also taken advantage of this technology. Apple Pay was created and rolled out on October 20th, 2014. This technology enabled Apple users to utilize NFC technology to pay at POS systems using most of their Apple devices. Google Pay was originally called Google Wallet when it was released in 2011. Google Wallet offered NFC payments and peer-to-peer payments. In 2015, the NFC functionality of Google Wallet was moved to Android Pay, and then in 2018, Google announced that it would merge Android Pay and Google Wallet back together and call it Google Pay. Samsung Pay was originally released in the United States on September 28, 2015. Like Apple Pay and Google Pay, Samsung Pay enables users to take advantage of NFC technology. However, Samsung Pay also utilizes magnetic source transmission technology. In this section, I will explain how each of the payment methods function and each of their information security risks. The magnetic stripe technology is the black bar located on the back of most modern-day credit cards and is also referred to as mag stripe technology. It works by using tiny iron-based magnetic particles in a plastic-like film. Each of the particles is a solenoid, which is a coil wound into a tightly packed helix around a high permeability metallic core. The solenoid produces a strong magnetic field when a current flows through it. Information is stored on the magstripe in 3 tracks that are mandated by the ISO/IEC standard 7811. Typically, only tracks 1 and 2 are utilized by banks. The data stored in the tracks is stored as binary code. When a user slides their magstripe card into a card reader, the card is dragged over the reader head, which sends a voltage to the solenoids on the magstripe card. The voltage is amplified, and then the binary code is recorded by the card reader. The card reader will then validate and authenticate the card number and approve or reject the transaction. The authentication process takes place in seconds, which was a huge upgrade from having to authenticate purchases over the phone or by using a booklet. Magstripe cards are also extremely cheap to manufacture at about 10 cents per card. Now, to get into some of the security concerns of magstripe technology. Magstripe cards should be avoided at all costs in our day and age. As stated above, the data of magstripe cards is stored in binary. There is no encryption of the data. This means that if someone were to read the card's data, then they could store the data and reuse it to make their own transactions. The data is also the same every single time a transaction is completed. One of the most common ways for criminals to obtain your data is to use a gas station credit card skimmer. A credit card skimmer goes directly over or inside the genuine card reader and then will copy your card's data onto an SD card. Once a criminal has your card's data, they're able to clone that data onto one of their own cards, and then they can make fraudulent transactions. Card skimmers are not the only threat to magstripe cards. In 2013, Target had a massive data breach where malware was installed on Target's network. The malware copied all of the credit card data from the Target POS terminals. Magstripe technology is outdated and should not be used because of its lack of encryption. The process for using the EMV chip starts by the user dipping their card into the card reader. Once the card is inserted, an agreed application will begin to run and offline data authentication will occur in the form of static data authentication, dynamic data authentication, or combined data authentication. The EMV chip will give the card reader a one-time integrated circuit card verification value, also known as ICVV value, and a public key in order to authenticate itself. The EMV chip will not share its private key. Cardholder verification will then ensue, with the user having to do one of the following: do their signature, insert personal identification number, or do nothing. The cardholder verification type will be chosen by the bank who issued the card. The card reader will then approve, disapprove, or go to online processing for more information before making a decision. During the transaction, an application cryptogram is generated using two-key triple DES cryptography. The method of using an EMV chip is much more secure than a magstripe because sensitive data is never shared. The information that is shared is a one-time code and a public key that are encrypted using two-key triple DES cryptography. This method will usually also require user verification in the form of a signature or PIN number. Due to the increases in information security of the EMV chip, these cards are much more difficult to clone or duplicate. EMV chip-enabled cards are also able to be used completely offline. This is important for vendors in the case of their internet connection going off. One of the primary security concerns with EMV cards is how the card issuing financial institutions set up and deploy their back-end systems. Most, if not all, EMV chip-enabled cards still have their magnetic stripe on the back just in case newer EMV terminals fail. This proves to be a major security concern. When the EMV chip is dipped into the card reader, the ICVV should be shared, and this is a one-time dynamic code, meaning it protects against the copying and cloning of data. The issue comes into play when the CVV from the magnetic stripe is also shared during the transaction. The card issuing financial institution should decline the transaction if both the ICVV and the CVV are presented during the same transaction. However, a lot of financial institutions still do not have their system set up this way. This means that criminals can insert shimmers, which are high-tech card skimming devices, into EMV card readers and do a man-in-the-middle attack to capture users' data. Then they're able to use the CVV that should not have been present to create clones of the magnetic stripe, thus creating fraudulent credit cards. The creation of EMV chips only protects against card-present transactions. This means that online purchases are no safer than using magnetic stripe cards. Card-not-present fraud is still on the rise. In this section, I will cover the implementation and advantages of contactless payment options such as Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay, and RFID-enabled contactless credit cards. I will also cover the security concerns associated with them. There are a couple implementations of contactless payment. The first implementation is through the use of radio frequency identification, RFID, in credit cards. Contactless-enabled cards will contain a small chip that allows for RFID communication to contactless-enabled pay terminals. The RFID chip contains the card information and identification. When you bring the card close to the terminal, the chip is then powered and the information is read by the terminal. Sensitive data that transmits between the card and the pay terminal is randomized and encrypted, which is tokenization, so that only the pay terminal is able to access and process the information. Each of the virtual contactless payment options are implemented in their own ways. Google Pay and Samsung Pay utilize cloud-based host card emulation, HCE, and Apple Pay utilizes device-based secure element, SE. Each of the payment options use NFC technology, which allows transactions to be completed when in close proximity to an NFC-enabled payment terminal. Apple utilizes NFC technology to implement their contactless payments. Apple requires biometric authentication or a personal identification number for the user to be able to access and use the card stored in Apple Pay. The biometric options available are Face ID or the fingerprint scanner. In order to secure your credit card information, Apple uses tokenization. When you provide your credit card information to Apple Pay, Apple will contact the issuing bank and receive a device account number, DAN, that will be stored on a secure chip on the device. The DAN structurally resembles a credit card number and is the thing that is passed on to the merchant when any payment is made, and authorized in the usual way with the bank. Google Pay also utilizes NFC technology to implement their contactless payments. Google Pay allows for fingerprint, personal identification number, a pattern, or a traditional password for authentication to allow the user to make a transaction. For Google Pay, the only time you provide your card details is during the initial setup process. Google then saves your card data on their internal servers, and they issue the user a virtual card. When the user makes a transaction, the vendor will never see your actual card details. They will only see the virtual card details. When the virtual card is then charged by the seller, Google charges the user's stored actual card information. Samsung Pay works by using either NFC technology or MST technology. Samsung Pay allows for fingerprint, Face ID, iris scan, or a personal identification number for authentication to allow the user to make a transaction. MST technology is useful because it allows Samsung Pay to have backward compatibility with older payment terminals. MST works by mimicking the signal from regular magnetic stripe card, which allows it to work with almost any POS terminal. Samsung Pay operates similarly to Google Pay. Samsung will store the user's credit card information inside an encrypted internal server, and it will issue the user a tokenized virtual credit card number. When a transaction occurs, the payment terminal will receive the tokenized virtual card number, as well as a one-time code to decrypt the card number. The payment terminal will then decrypt the tokenized virtual card number, and then the virtual card number will be charged. The vendor will never have access to the user's actual card number. Contactless payment methods are much more secure than many of the other payment methods. For contactless payment options, most of the data is encrypted and very little sensitive data is actually transmitted. However, there are a few security risks. The first is if you lose your RFID-enabled contactless credit card. Due to the nature of the card, the user's card would be able to be used without any personal identification number or signature. The caveat is that most contactless cards have a small daily budget of around $50 to $100. Most issuing financial institutions will also reimburse you for any fraudulent amount spent. The main risk for virtual contactless payment options is for host card emulation services such as Google Pay and Samsung Pay. The worry is that someone could hack into Google or Samsung's internal servers and obtain your credit card information. This is true and it is a legitimate concern, but the hacker would also have to find out how to decrypt all of the credit card information. In the next section, we will take a look at COVID-19's effect on virtual payment options, and we will also discuss the future payment options with increased security. COVID-19 has and is having a lasting impact on our everyday lives. COVID-19 has also started to affect the virtual payment industry. Since most people are trying to ensure that they do not get COVID-19, they're being more careful about germs and what they do and do not touch. This has led to a massive increase in the amount of people using contactless payment options when shopping. Contactless payments give customers a peace of mind that they're not getting COVID-19 on their credit cards when they're making a transaction. There has been a plus 40% of year-to-year global contactless growth between January to March this year. Additionally, in the US, 51% of people have resorted to using mobile wallets like Apple Pay and other tap-to-go credit cards. Contactless payment methods are here to stay, and I only see them getting used more and more in the future. Many companies are crafting new payment options that have the same or an increased level of security. One of the options that has not yet become mainstream is MasterCard's biometric credit card. This card has an embedded fingerprint scanner that needs to be used to authenticate the user before any card-present transaction can take place. This eliminates the security concern of losing your contactless credit card. Another future payment option is the use of microchips implanted into people's bodies. A Swedish tech firm called Biohacks has implanted thousands of microchips into Swedish citizens. The microchips make use of RFID technology to make transactions. The microchips are only the size of a grain of rice, and they are most commonly implanted into users' hands. The microchip can also be used to open RFID activated doors. Another technology that has recently been gaining a lot of traction is blockchain. Blockchain is the platform for digital money transactions that is commonly used for cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Blockchain is a digital and public ledger that keeps track of and records all transactions. Blockchain works by having a series of blocks that each contain a unique hash number and a link that connects it to the previous block. If one block in the sequence is changed, then the series of blocks becomes invalid. The whole entire blockchain is encrypted and is decentralized. Blockchain is an extremely secure system that we will see more and more of in the future. Before you go, I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask you. Please answer them in the discussion space below. Have you ever used a virtual wallet like Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, or Google Pay? And the other question is, would you ever get implanted with an RFID microchip so that you can make transactions or open doors? If you have any questions for me, please ask me in the reply section below. Thank you all for listening.